Alright, welcome back to another episode of The Taken Ting, the show where I go through and react to all of your Destiny-related comments and ideas. This is probably going to be a bit of a shorter episode because I don't have a whole lot of time today and there's a lot of comments to go over, a lot of videos that need to get made. So I'm only going to pick a handful from each post and video, and maybe I'll go over some more next time. So I'm going to be cherry picking a bit more than usual in this episode. Anyway, starting off, these are comments under my post basically just asking you all how we're feeling about Solar 3.0, and this is what you had to say. Reach Cole says, meh, healing got nerfed massively. And that's something that I'm hearing some people complaining about, is how certain abilities have gotten nerfed with seemingly no explanation behind it. Now, I think Dado made a really good point in his recent video about Solar 3.0. He basically said that he feels like Bungie is trying to push us more towards build crafting, but they've just done a pretty bad job at communicating that this time around, and I would agree 100%. Sunshot with an ornament says, I'm happy it's here, but Warlocks rework wasn't too nice. I could say why right now, but I don't really want to type a lot. Hunters and Titans are great though. That's another thing look, I'm a Titan main. I don't play Warlocks and Hunters a whole lot. I jumped on my Warlock and Hunter recently here just to check it out, and I really liked the Warlock snap. That's probably my favorite thing to come out of this whole Solar 3.0 thing. But I completely understand why Warlocks are kind of upset right now, especially with the, I forget what the ability is called. Is it the Phoenix Dive? That one seemed to have gotten quite neutered. I think Warlocks are very justified in being kind of upset right now. Hunters, I think they've gotten the best treatment with Solar 3.0, honestly. AJ says, it really depends on the class. Warlocks suffer a lot in terms of build potential. You're basically locked into one playstyle that suffers in more difficult content. The loss of bottom tree skills and nerfs to middle tree skills really limited what they can do, especially without seasonal mods. However, the Roy Mustang snap is so much fun despite all the problems with the class. Yeah, I 100% agree. Titan is the same, but only because of the nerfs to its different perks and abilities. Without the seasonal mods, it starts losing a lot of viability, and even with them, it's limited to heal/tank build instead of an ability damage build. Not sure if I agree with that. I really wish their supers had more ignition, and I wish that Sunspots and Roaring Flames dealt more damage so I could lean into that role more, especially with the new concentration ability. Yeah, that's one thing I've heard a lot, is the desire to have more ignition upon super kills. Hunter is really good. They can spec into a lot of different builds compared to the others, and they have excellent boss DPS and team support because of their supers and radiance buffs. Also, Gunpowder Gamble is extremely fun too. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think this is the common consensus. You know, there are some people saying that Solar 3.0 is amazing, and some people saying it's absolute dog shit. I think this is where most people are lying though. Warlocks definitely got the short end of the stick. Titans, they're fine. Hunters are really good. Somewhere between alright and underwhelming. It feels incomplete, and I think the fact that there's stuff like better tracking on solar supers and explosion on kills with supers being fragments is just a really dumb concept. I have given some thought recently into the whole aspects and fragments and seasonal mod stuff. I wonder if Bungie would consider adding, once we get Arc 3.0 reworked, we'll have a 1-season buffer between Arc 3.0 and Lightfall, and in that season, I would imagine we're not getting a new subclass because that'd be weird, and we're not, obviously we'd be out of light subclasses to rework. So I wonder if in that season they'll give us new aspects for our light subclasses. I think that'd be really cool because Stasis obviously has more aspects and fragments than the light subclasses. So I think it'd be cool if in that 1-season buffer they gave us some more customization to our light supers. I think that'd be really, really cool. Cloglow says, I honestly prefer 2.0 because my hammer did more damage. I don't know. I honestly find the damage on Titan hammers to be just fine. I mean, I'm not sure if there was just some really crazy builds that I was missing beforehand that made them way better. But no, I actually think the hammer damage is fine right now. Honestly, if anything, I think Titans have remained kind of unchanged. These are comments under the last episode of Friendly Fire. Sunflower Sumo says, now that you're small is the best time to make a Discord server. It would be more personal rather than being a massive 1,000 plus person server. So I only bring this up because we actually do have a Discord server now. It's called The Hidden Disciples. I'll leave the link in the description. We've been having a lot of fun over there so far, so feel free to come check it out. I'd love to play with some of you guys. This video was posted before Solar 3.0 came around, and we were talking about the idea of whether or not Warlocks should be given Radiance again, or the ability to self-res. I maintain that I think if Warlocks had the ability to self-res, it wouldn't be broken in Destiny 2's economy, and I think they could find ways to really balance it. And honestly, I do think it should come back at some point. I think it was a neat ability that added to that fiery phoenix fantasy of the solar tree and Warlocks of D1. Gsum the Patient says, well, in PvP, now you can see what supers your enemies have, so if you just leave a Warlock that had self-res, you're kinda at fault for not adapting to it. Also, supers are meant to be powerful. One super can wipe an entire team. That's a very very good point. And with self-res, you can just have increased recharge and your standard weapons, so it actually feels weaker than other supers. That's another thing. A lot of people in the last video were talking about how overpowered it would be and how it's not fair, but I think there is credence to the idea that, look, supers are supposed to be powerful. We don't need to completely neuter it, just change it a little bit, modify it. Normax says, its Jester actually brings up a really good point. What if in the final shape we're forced to choose either the light or the darkness, and that would affect what path our character takes? Kind of like in the past where you had to choose whether to side with the Drifter or the Vanguard. I really do think Destiny should do something like this. I think it would add to that living, breathing world that they're trying to create. One thing I think you can say Destiny has been lacking in for a while is, yeah, we don't get to make a lot of choices, you know, it's a very linear story. I think Bungie was experimenting with that, with siding with the Vanguard and siding with the Drifter, but that never really went anywhere. You know, it just kind of happened. I don't even remember who I sided with. I think I sided with the Drifter. But I really hope they take that concept and kind of double down on it. I know they're not going to go as far as making us pick light subclasses versus dark subclasses, because that's just not fun. But I do hope they start messing around with it a little bit. Although, if we really wanted to go deep into the decision-making, you know, style of gameplay and giving us more choice, I think that would call for, I'm going to say Destiny 3 as a placeholder. It doesn't have to be Destiny 3, but some sort of big engine change, some sort of big shakeup and change in the design philosophy. So I don't really see this type of thing happening, you know, like us making impactful decisions, and I'll probably have a whole video about Destiny 3, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea. Umbra says for self-res and raids, you can make it so that they use their revive token instead, and it just gives a second chance. It can only be done once per person. For PvP, they can implement no super armor for it like Golden Gun, oh, that's true, or so have it so it's very obvious that a Warlock can and probably will self-res, like their ghost is glowing bright with fire and people can act on that. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, someone else brought up the idea of having a solar sword projection over the ghost as an indicator, but I think this is really cool, like just having it visually glowing, that'd be awesome. And yeah, again, I think there are plenty of ways to balance self-res. I think we have this knee-jerk reaction when we hear Radiance self-res. You know, we remember falling at the gates of the lighthouse in D1, or every Warlock being forced to run self-res in certain activities because it was broken, but I think if Bungie implemented it carefully, it really wouldn't be that bad. The Kid says, I don't even need to play as a fallen Guardian, but I'd love to fight alongside them. On that note, I think the Traveler choosing the Hive over the Fallen shows that the light is given to those the Traveler sees as beneficial to itself and not races that need the light. The Hive don't need the light to be powerful, however there is strength to be gathered by converting them to the light. I think it's a slap in the face to the Fallen that the light has now passed over them twice, and I also think there is an opportunity for some good storytelling when they decide to bring Eris back, because I can see even more Fallen joining her out of spite. Ooh, that'd be a really cool story beat. Look, if they bring Eris back, they need to make her a bit more interesting, because to me, she was always just kind of the stepping stone to Witch Queen, and I trust that they would. But yeah, that is interesting. I do want to fight alongside Fallen and Cabal and whatnot, and whoever else we end up allying with. I think it'd be really cool to implement them more into story missions. Also the Crow as well. I want to see more like non-player characters helping us in missions. I think it would really help to add to the atmosphere of it all, you know? And in terms of the Traveler choosing the Hive as a benefit to himself, I can't really comment on that just because I'm not familiar with the lore and the implications that has to it. You know, I think it could almost be seen as an act of mercy to choose the Hive and free them from the deep. I don't know, maybe there's some lore aspect I'm missing here. Gabe Douglas says, I just got an amazing theory. What if in Lightfall the Traveler loses to the Witness and our ghosts shut down and we end up falling in battle, then the Witness offers us salvation and we're brought back to life via the Nightmares subclass? That would be cool. That would be really cool. You know, that's something, obviously we throw around some wild ideas, that's something that I could see happening, and I think it could make for a really interesting campaign. Like, what if for a half or a large majority of the campaign, we just didn't have a ghost? Like, what if everything was a respawn restricted area? I think it could also make Lightfall very challenging in an interesting way. And yeah, it would be a cool way to give us the Nightmare subclass. And yeah, tying in the whole idea of salvation. That's really cool. I like that idea. Hulk Smash 031 says, in another video I heard someone mention neutral subclasses. So if we have Stasis, Poison, and Taken, then after the final shape we would have neutral subclasses like Siva, but something else I thought of is a yellow necromancy power like Nokris had. That'd be cool too. I think if we get Taken, that's kind of gonna fill the void of necromancy, because at the end of the day, Taken is a form of necromancy. I don't think there's really room for two of those, but that is an interesting idea, having neutral subclasses. Nightwolf Noble 6 says, in relation to self-res Warlocks, make it an aspect, give it one slot, a long cooldown for the super as built-in change like Bacchus, and give it some kind of cooldown timer. That way they really gotta want to run it to run it. Plus it could be added to all classes. I don't know if I want to add self-res to all the classes. I think it's kind of cool that only the Warlocks would be able to do it, but yeah, making it an aspect, I could absolutely see them doing that. Alright, this is under the Destiny Power and Champion problem video. Durag says this, and this is the most upvoted comment on this video. My biggest problem with the seasonal model is that I never play enough in a given season to get high enough power to attempt Grandmasters. And man, I feel that. Look, I play this game a lot. Even I was just barely getting to 1575 last season to attempt a Grandmaster, and by that point, I just didn't have the time to do it. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that's another reason why this system kind of needs to change a little bit. Whether you want to go with the solutions I offer in that video or make your own, I really do think Destiny is getting to a point where we can no longer keep adding on power levels. It's just not really going to work. You know, look, this season, they've only added 10 power levels and I don't feel like grinding them. I really don't. I have to if I want to perform in trials, you know, optimally, but man, I really don't want to. It's just that grind has gotten so tedious. And look, I don't mind doing things over and over again. I just don't like doing it for the sole purpose of bumping that number in my inventory up. You know what I mean? JP says, at this point, they could just fix the power level to a set amount for all gear and weapons and just use the artifact levels as the seasonal leveling, and it would reset with each new season and artifact. This would also cut down on the need for infusion materials, which would help with decreasing material costs for new players, story-focused players, and those without so much time to invest. That's true. If the primary game loop is do an activity to get the loot you want, and the secondary loop they've been leaning into more is the build crafting, then currently newer and more casual players get held back by need for materials, especially when it comes to armor. Yeah, I guess I never really considered that. You know, newer players or players that don't have a lot of time, yeah, you're probably not having a very good time with, you know, getting them all the materials you need. That's a very good point. If players no longer needed to worry about infusing all their gear up, they could focus more on the primary and secondary game loops and just let their XP accumulate as they play, powering them up for the latest seasonal content. Also, more focus on XP leveling rather than gear leveling would limit the issues of RNG and let players spend their time doing the activities with the loot they want rather than chasing pinnacle drops to maybe get what they want to increase their power level. I'm not going to read the rest of this just for time's sakes. I am running really low on time, but you raise a lot of really good points here, and I think that absolutely is something that should be considered, you know, essentially just wiping out that power number in general. I'm not sure the grind would then feel as satisfying, not that it feels super satisfying now, but I mean, we do need something to grind for, some sort of level or rank or something, but that's a pretty decent solution. Alright, Dancing Viru leaves a really long comment with a lot of good ideas in it, so I'm going to sum it up for you. He obviously mentions that, yeah, Destiny's progression system really just needs to be reformed at this point, which is why I think it's such a monumental task. And his idea is essentially to take the 4 power bands that we have, so the power floor, the soft cap, the power cap, and the pinnacle cap, and kind of change them to match the 4 rarities of our gear. So common, uncommon, legendary, and exotic. So essentially having different rarity variants of legendary weapons instead of gear being exclusive to each tier. And then I guess you'd be able to upgrade them in order to reach what is effectively the power cap or pinnacle cap or whatever. Like maybe if you're wearing all legendary gear, that is the quote power cap. He says, I think that's where the progression should go, towards collecting weapons with either specific traits or using old weapons and grind for the artifact mods we need for beneficial effects in challenging endgame content. And the weapon crafting could turn into a wonderful icing on this transformative cake. That's a really, really neat idea. I never thought about directly tying our power level into rarity. And at the end of the day, Destiny is a looter shooter, so I think a system like this could really fit. And that's the thing, is there is a lot of systems that could fit. We just kind of need to figure out which one's best. And by we, I of course mean Bungie. He also says some really nice things at the bottom that I always appreciate. Those kinds of comments make my day, and I'm so glad you enjoy this type of content. Kodiak says, a lot of great points here. I do have a thought that might be interesting and could make the game harder. Maybe they could have something like you do less or even more damage if you're using a light or dark subclass towards an enemy using the opposite one. Ooh. Of the two, like Light Hive being weaker to dark or more resilient to light subclasses, or even the element. That's a really cool idea. I like that, because in this video we talk about how, you know, of the 6 enemy races, at this point you could kind of split them down the middle. You have Fallen, Cabal, and Hive on the light side, and then Scorn, Taken, and Vex on the dark side. I think that'd be pretty neat, you know? It'd be kind of like another layer to shielding, almost, and I guess that could get kind of complicated, but something like this could be really, really interesting. I like that. Okay, I'm only going to go over 2 comments on the How Not to Solo Prophecy Part 2 video, but I seriously, all the comments on this video have been really amazing. I'm glad you all seem to be enjoying this so much. I had a blast putting it well, no I didn't. I hated putting this together, but I love making videos like this, and I really do want to make more videos like this. Poyo420 says, really glad I got this in my recommended. Well made and great commentary. Thank you, Poyo. Don't really see many challenge videos in Destiny that aren't insanely high-end and honestly often a bit unoriginal. If you keep up making stuff this good on interesting topics, you'll make it far. Well, I really appreciate that, and I read this comment here because I do want to do more challenge videos. So if you have an idea for like a neat kind of challenge, it could be on my account or on my girlfriend's account or a new account or whatever, feel free to leave them down below. I have an idea for the next challenge that I am really excited about. It's Crucible related, not Trials related, but Crucible related, and I am really excited about it. But I do want to do more challenges. This kind of content I think is the most fun to put together, and I'm really glad you all seem to be enjoying it. Scarlet Bean says, Eris is a hunter and Elsie would also be a hunter if she was forged in light. So this is the ongoing debate on the Dark Vanguard and what their equivalent classes would be if they were guardians. Again, I maintain the stance that I know Eris was a hunter. I don't think she's a hunter anymore. She screams Warlock to me. I think just because she was a hunter doesn't necessarily mean she has to stay a hunter. I think she's too much of a Warlock now. And yeah, Elsie would absolutely be a hunter. I 100% agree with that part. But seriously, the comments on this video have been so nice. I've read them all. I'm glad everyone seems to be enjoying this video. I had a lot of fun making it. Okay, now lastly, these are comments under the video where I give my week 1 first impressions on season 17. Cameron Hicks says, I disagree with the story and nightmares being underwhelming, but I feel very mixed on if I like this or not. This season is the most mixed I've felt about Destiny. Yeah, like again, there's some things about this season that I really, really like, and there's some things that I really, really don't like, and I can't really put my finger on a lot of it. It just feels kind of weird. Maybe it's because we're doing this whole season of the Haunted thing in June and not, you know, around October, but I feel like that's really grasping at strings. I can't really put my finger on why this season feels so strange. What it might be is that with everything in this season, there's something really cool and then something that just doesn't feel right or that isn't that great. Like Solar 3.0. Kind of a mixed bag. There's some really great things and some really not great things. The Leviathan coming back, kind of a mixed bag. It's cool that it's here, it's cool that we have a new patrol space, but there's not a whole lot to do in it. The dungeon, kind of a mixed bag, at least from what I'm seeing. The dungeon itself is great, the weapons are really cool, but the armor is just not that good. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, yeah, definitely feeling a little mixed on it. But let's give it a little bit more time. Dan Hockey says, frankly, I think this season is going to fizzle out quickly. Seems like the weakest season we've had since Hunt. Ooh. It's not bad, but it seems like most of the dev time went towards bringing back the Leviathan as a patrol, which I found personally boring. Look, that's another thing. I'm sure a lot of development time did go to bringing back the Leviathan. Again, we'll see what happens. I do feel like, yeah, unless you're a hardcore Destiny player, people might not really be sticking around for the entire 3 months this time around, but at the end of the day, we also are coming off the heels of Witch Queen, which I think is also kind of impacting my perception of this season because we had so much to do last season that now that we're in a normal season following an annual DLC, it doesn't feel as substantial. SnottyToe169 says, it gives me the feeling I had during Season of Arrivals. It felt like there wasn't a lot of stuff, but the stuff that was there was still for some reason entertaining. I personally like the Nightmare stuff, but I much prefer Hive or Fallen focused stuff. Season of Arrivals was my personal favorite season, purely because of the narrative and the way they revealed it. I thought was so cool. So for that reason alone, Season of Arrivals continues to be my favorite season, but yeah, it is kind of like that in the sense that there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to do in Season of Arrivals, but the things we had to do and the story and atmosphere it was setting up was really cool. Commander Fox says, I think the Nightmare Containment public event would be much better if there was an element of randomness along with more bosses at the end. Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see if we get more added on to this event as the season goes on. I'm predicting that we won't, but assuming we don't, yeah, the Nightmare Containment event is already starting to feel repetitive and a little dry. And I think a big part of that is because it is the exact same thing every time, which is strange because it's on the Leviathan, and the Leviathan raid changed every week. So I'm hoping that this also changes, but I'm not super hopeful that it will. StamX says, I feel like the story will carry this season. Bringing back Leviathan as a patrol space is really cool in concept, but I feel it was done poorly. The entire Leviathan was ported to the new engine, as we can see the underbelly existing in Sever missions, but we only get 2 rooms in patrol. Why? I feel like it is almost disrespectful to the legacy that Leviathan left behind to bring it back in the way that they did. I don't know, I like the season overall and the dungeon is great, but I just want Leviathan back for real. Okay, this is an interesting take. See, I really like what they've done with the Leviathan, changing it up a bit and actually bringing something back from the DCV. However, I just think there's not a whole lot to do in it. I don't mind a smaller patrol space. I think that's completely fine. And I think the Leviathan as a patrol space is pretty interesting. But yeah, there isn't a whole lot to do in it, and I think right now that's the biggest problem with the Leviathan. It just needs some more stuff to do. Jeremiah says, I agree about Nightmares, but I'm glad that they are hopefully ending the Nightmare storyline. It always felt incomplete. See, I feel weird about Nightmares because on the one hand, it's cool and it's an interesting concept. It's also kind of directly tied to the darkness, but on the other hand, I feel like Bungie is struggling a bit to make them interesting. Like, Nightmares to me feel like an excuse to bring back old enemies, which I think we're past that being interesting. Like, it doesn't mean it can't be interesting, but like it looks like they're teasing Gull coming back as Keitel's Nightmare. And you know, I love seeing Callus back, but he's not, you know, he's not a nightmare, he's an actual being, as far as we know. I hope they start doing more, I hope they start handling nightmares a bit more like how they handle them in the dungeon. And spoilers for the dungeon if you haven't done it, so if you haven't done the dungeon, skip ahead a little bit. But the final boss of the dungeon is a nightmare of Keitel, which I think is really interesting. Like, instead of looking to the past, why don't we use the nightmares as a way to create cool, like, what-if scenarios? Like, what if we had to fight Keitel, you know? What if we had to fight Mithrax for some reason? Like, I don't know, I've always seen the nightmares as a vector to reuse assets. And I'm usually not one to complain about this, but this feels a little too on the nose. And it might also just be because usually when nightmares are involved, the only person who's like super involved in the story is Eris. And I like Eris, but I actually like her more when she's not like the main vector of storytelling. Like, when Eris is a side character, I find her very enjoyable. When she's the main character, I just don't think Eris can carry a season. And that might sound bad, maybe some people disagree with me, but I do think that kind of contributes towards my general not liking of the nightmare stuff. Logan V Primus says, I watched the Witch Queen reveal again, and they did say it's a D1 raid. My theory is a season with Rasputin coming back and Wrath of the Machine being the raid, and also from what I've seen, there's a lot of Arc stuff in Rasputin's bunker which would tie in with Arc 3.0. So he's talking about, in this video I mentioned that unless Bungie specifically said that next season we're getting a reprised Destiny 1 raid, that I think now that Leviathan is back, that Leviathan will be the raid that we get back next season. However, he's saying that in the Witch Queen reveal, they did say it would be a D1 raid, which is cool, I'm glad, because I'd rather see something like King's Fall, Wrath of the Machine, Crota's End than Leviathan, as much as I like Leviathan. And while I disagree with the notion of it being Wrath of the Machine, I do agree that season 18 could be a Rasputin themed season, because like you said, that would actually tie pretty nicely into Arc 3.0. So yeah, I'm gonna say it's more likely that King's Fall is coming back, and less likely that Wrath of the Machine is, purely because I don't think Bungie would introduce an entire new enemy type. Well, whether or not you count Siva as an enemy type is up to you, but I don't think they would reintroduce Siva in a season. I just don't really see them doing that, at least completely. Maybe we get some Siva weapons, or maybe it's just a remastered Wrath of the Machine that has the same essence and encounters as the old raid, but it's just Fallen and not Siva. I don't think people would like that very much. Axiomatic Plays says, while I don't really like the Hake function over form look, it makes plenty of sense that it's the dungeon armor. There's been a lore tab or two this season about how Hake products can keep your body safe in dangerously unknown environments, like for instance, the constantly shifting mind of Callus. Ooh. Edit, I forgot to mention, it's also the same armor that other expeditions into the Mindscape are using. Okay, I think that makes it better. I didn't know that. I think that makes it better. I still don't really like it, because like, look, like you said, it is the function over form look, and that does actually, like, it makes sense. I don't actually mind the way the Titan's armor looks, and I am a Titan. I don't mind the way the Titan armor looks. I think it looks decent enough. Oh man, the Warlocks got done so dirty, at least I think. I'm not a Warlock, but I don't like the Warlock armor, and Hunters get more asymmetrical armor. I know you guys love that. I still don't like the armor a whole lot, but that is actually pretty good reasoning as to why it's the dungeon armor. Even though, you know, I'm sure it's just keeping in theme. Like, the next dungeon will probably be Suros themed armor, or hell, Tex Mechanica themed armor, or Omelon themed armor. That could actually be really cool. And I only say that because Prophecy was Dido themed armor. So I would imagine they'll keep up the trend. We'll see. We'll see. Ninja Twinkie says the new dungeon armor looks like a new light set. That's the thing. When I saw it, I was like, there's no way. There's no way that this is the dungeon armor, especially. And at the time, I didn't know what the dungeon was, but I was like, if it really is in Callus's mind, is this really the armor we're going with? Because it does. Some of it, not all of it, but some of it literally looks like, you know, uncommon armor, or like EDZ vendor armor, you know? Norb, or Norby, says, I like the story of the new season, but I find the Nightmare Containment public event feels boring, to the point where I camp out at the location of the third Nightmare Containment event and wait for someone else to start it while I do something else on my phone. Gameplay-wise, this season is so buggy. There's so much wrong with it, good and bad. It really feels like they didn't test anything. I haven't noticed any bugs aside from the very, very obvious loading issues, like your character not loading in, your weapons not loading in, you know, stuff like that. That seems like the most obvious one that I've ran into constantly. You know, it feels like if you log into the tower the wrong way, your Guardian just won't log in. Your Guardian just won't load in. Solar 3.0 is amazing on Hunters and Titans, but Warlocks really got shafted. You're forced into one playstyle that doesn't really work in endgame content. And Healer Warlocks are just completely butchered, just straight up. Middle Tree is gone, Lumina plus Assembler is dead, no point in playing into the idea of being a combat medic. Also, what the f is Phoenix Dive? The f? Same cooldown as my Rift and so much shittier? Why? Alright, you can tell this was written by a Warlock main. No, seriously, Warlocks, you guys have... I think Warlocks are justified in being pretty upset. Like, I don't think Solar 3.0 Warlock is bad. However, they definitely messed with and maybe took away some things or just moved things around in very strange ways that did really neuter certain playstyles. Now, I wouldn't say it doesn't really work in endgame content, because I think you could kind of make anything work in endgame content, especially if you decided to really build into something, which I think is what Bungie is trying to push us towards. However, I do think Warlocks have quite a bit of reason to be a little upset right now. And yet that Phoenix Dive thing is so weird. Like, I'm not even a Warlock, and I hopped on my Warlock the other day and I thought that was a little strange. Ad Astra says, I think the whole nightmare concept is cool and I like it, but I really wish we had new bosses to fight from the different factions as opposed to the same bosses in nightmare form. Yes, I completely agree. I think this is the underlying problem, reusing bosses. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It just feels like not a very strong narrative to begin with that is then made kind of boring because it's just an excuse to reuse bosses. And I don't like saying that. I don't like projecting and pretending like I understand the development side of things, but it does come off as an excuse to reuse bosses, which I don't know that I really like that. King Kermit John. I just feel like the Solar doesn't match up to Stasis or Void. Everything kind of feels like a meme. Snapping fingers, Titan meme hammer, Hunter shooting dynamite. It feels silly. There's some fun in Scorch and Restoration, but I don't feel like it has the same ease of use as Stasis or Void. Okay, I agree with half of the things you're saying here. I don't think Solar quite matches up to Void. I think you can make a very good argument depending on the class that it matches or even exceeds Stasis. Like, I honestly nowadays I just don't use Stasis a whole lot. Not because it's bad, but I just find that in most areas where I may have used Stasis before, now I'll just use something else like Void or Solar or even Arc, 'cause I Thunder Crash Titan a lot. So I kind of agree with that. Whether you think Solar is a bit more restrictive or just harder to use is up to you. I think for Hunters and Titans, it's just a bit harder to use than Stasis or Void. For Warlocks, it's definitely a bit more restrictive. As for everything feeling kind of like a meme, I gotta say I disagree, because here's the thing. I feel like the only thing you could maybe say is kind of memey is the Warlock snap. But I mean, I don't know, Titan meme hammer, I don't know about that. I think Bungie is just giving us cooler ways to further express and individualize one subclass from another. Because, you know, now, say what you will about Solar and Void, they feel pretty different from class to class. And especially since, you know, with the new melee abilities as well that each class seems to be getting, I think it is actually doing a pretty good job differentiating each one. So no, I don't think it, to me at least, I don't think it feels memey. Especially, I mean, like, the Hunter shooting dynamite, yeah, maybe, but I don't know, I kind of just think that's cool. Like, and again, if you don't want to shoot it, then just don't shoot it. But hey, to each their own, and if it feels silly to you, then it feels silly. And Solar definitely doesn't feel great to everyone right now. I mean, that's why we're talking about it. As for its ease of use, it definitely is not as easy to use as Stasis or Void. I agree with you there, but I don't think everything needs to be as easy to use as Stasis or Void. Like I mentioned in this video that Void is now my go-to just mindless subclass. Like if someone ever asked me what subclass to use, there's a pretty decent chance you can find some way to be useful using Void. I can't say the same about Stasis, which is why I don't necessarily agree that it's easy to use, at least in like endgame content or PvP especially. But Void, I mean, Void is so brutally powerful that you can kind of get away with using it anywhere on any class as long as you tweak your setup a little bit. And I don't think Solar and Arc need to be as easy to use as Void or Stasis, because it's not necessarily that Solar is bad right now, it's not even necessarily that Arc is bad right now, it's just that Void is really, really easy to use, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to have an easier to use subclass, and then some harder to use ones. Keep in mind, we're going to be getting a new subclass soon, in all likelihood. Actually, it's confirmed, we are getting a new subclass at some point, at least one. So I mean, things are going to look a lot different in a year's time. And I don't think all 5 of our subclasses are going to need to be as easy to use as Void. But that's just my opinion, and obviously, I know this is something we all probably feel a little bit different about, and that's totally fine. Enigma says, I think the new Crucible map is god-awful for 3v3. It works fine in 6v6, but even then, I still feel like I'm running around looking for people to fight. So I've only played on the new Crucible map a handful of times. I've just haven't gotten much of a chance to play a whole lot of Crucible. And I really like the map. I think, especially when Iron Banner comes back around with Rift, it's going to play really nicely. Bungie did say that they kind of made this map with Rift in mind, which we had a similar situation in the Taken King when Rift was first introduced, so I don't mind that. I do agree in the sense that I don't think this should be a Trials map. Well, I don't know. Look, if we can have Vostok be a Trials map, I see no reason why, is it Disjunction? Is that what the map is called? I see no reason why this map can't be a Trials map. You know, because, look, in my opinion, Vostok is a horrible 3v3 map. Horrible 3v3 map. Some people really like it. I think Aztecross actually really likes it, which I disagree, but maybe, you know, to some people it might feel a little large. I don't think it is. I think it's just fine. I've only played on it on momentum control because I needed to do that for seasonal challenges, and that did feel a little weird, but momentum control in general is just a little weird, so I wasn't reading too far into that. Andrew with 3 U's says, Bungie said we are getting a D1 raid next season. Yeah, so again, I think that's really, really great. I don't really want it to be Leviathan, so, you know, of course that means our choices are King's Fall, Wrath of the Machine, and Crota's End. I don't think it's going to be Crota's End. I think there's a chance, I honestly do, as much as we joke about it, I think there is a solid chance they bring Crota's End back as a dungeon. Well, then again, maybe they wouldn't, because now they're kind of committed to this whole dungeon, then raid, you know, back and forth every season. So maybe they want to hold on to all their raids. But yeah, my bet is still on King's Fall. I don't think we're getting Wrath of the Machine next season. I don't think we're getting Crota's End next season. But then again, they could decide to just go in order. So maybe we do get Crota's End next season, and then King's Fall. That could be interesting. I actually also got a comment somewhere. I couldn't find it, but it was someone proposing that what if when Savathun says that the Taken King will rise again, she was actually referring to the Drifter because he's so into his Taken stuff. And I thought that was interesting. I don't think that's what they're gonna do, but I thought that was really interesting. Calgore says, definitely the worst season we've had in some time. If you didn't buy the dungeon, you just have a lackluster public event and a reskinned raid area. I definitely would not say that this is the worst season we've had in some time. But I mean, honestly, like, I thought Season of the Lost was a pretty bad season, but that thing was extended, so I don't even know if you can count that. And I mean, even that had some pretty interesting stuff week to week, so I'm just waiting to see what happens at Reset, you know, every week. Dan Hockey says, just shows how far we've come. This season during the Shadowkeep area would have been praised, but year 4 raised the bar so much this season doesn't feel good in today's Destiny. I completely agree with that. I think, much like a lot of things in gaming, as much as that is kind of a controversial thing to say, I think the bar has been raised so high that, yeah, this probably, again, yeah, during Shadowkeep, absolutely, I think this season would have received a lot more praise, but coming off the heels of Witch Queen and Season of the Risen, it feels a little lackluster. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this episode of The Taken Ting. Of course, we change the name every week, so if you have name suggestions for this kind of video, leave them down below. And of course, feel free to leave your thoughts on everything we've talked about down below, and I'll try to feature as many of them as I can in next week's episode. If you want to join the Hidden Disciples Discord, I'll leave the link down below. You can come join us and do whatever you want in Destiny. I'm sure there's other people there that want to do it too. But if you made it to the end, I truly appreciate that. Sorry if this was a bit of a shorter episode. Thank you so much for hanging out, and goodbye.